Part 1. The air in the drowned city of Orleans didn't smell of ash and steel, but of something far older, a sweet, cloying decay that clung to the silt and shadows. It was the scent of alien flora, of terraforming pollens the architects had seeded into the wetlands, weaving their unnervingly perfect blossoms through the cracked facades of Bourbon Street. 10 years ago, we had called it the scent of salvation. Now, it was just the perfume of our gilded cage. I pulled our skiff through the murky channel that had once been Rue Royale, the silence broken only by the gentle lap of brackish water against wrought iron balconies. Above, the sky was never truly dark, hazed with the perpetual lavender twilight of the atmospheric filters they'd anchored in the stratosphere. It was beautiful, a sky from a dream, and I hated it with every fiber of my being. Their beauty was a weapon, the most insidious one they possessed. They had come not with thunder and war, but with gifts that shamed the sun. They'd halted the rising tides, reversed the planet's fever, and cured the plagues our own science had failed to contain. They called themselves the Architects, and they promised to help us build a better world. We didn't realize they meant to be the sole designers, and that our own history, our own messy, vibrant, chaotic humanity, was the first blueprint they intended to discard. My name is Elias, and I used to be an archivist. I saved stories, cataloged the ghosts of paper and celluloid, believing that our past was the anchor to our future. Now, the past was a crime, a sickness the architects were methodically curing us of. My sister, Clara, had been a believer. She'd been one of the first to embrace the harmony, the subtle psionic field they'd wrapped around our cities. It smoothed the rough edges of the soul. They said it quieted the anger, the grief, the fear. Claire used to say it felt like peace, like the universe was finally humming in a key she could understand. She'd gone willingly to the re-education cenacle in what was left of the Garden District, eager to shed the trauma of an unguided existence. I hadn't seen her in 6 years. I didn't know if the woman who shared my blood still existed, or if she was just another placid vessel, her memories curated, her passions pruned, another perfect flower in their alien garden. My fight wasn't for a future they designed, but for the past they were trying to erase. Because in those memories, Clara was still my sister. Anya, perched at the skiff's bow, raised a hand, her knuckles scarred and brown against the polished wood of her spear gun. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was more commanding than any shout. A former Coast Guard captain who'd seen the coastline get swallowed by the sea before the architects arrived. She trusted the water more than people and the aliens not at all. She was all sharp angles and honed instinct, a creature of the bayou who had adapted while the rest of us had merely surrendered. I guided the skiff into the submerged archway of an old hotel, the water sucking greedily at the rotting wood. We were in the shadow zone now, a pocket of the city where the harmony field was weakest. Thanks to the sheer density of the old ironwork and the dampening effect of the deep water, it was here, in these quiet, drowning pockets, that we could still feel the old echoes. Rage, defiance, hope, all the beautiful, terrible things the architects were trying to save us from. See it. Anya's voice was a low rasp, like stones grinding together. She pointed with her chin toward our destination, its 3 spires just visible over a collapsed rooftop. The Cathedral of St. Louis, the heart of the old city, and now, the heart of their control. The architects had a flair for the dramatic, for co-opting our most sacred spaces. They hadn't destroyed the cathedral, they'd hollowed it out, filled it with their silent, throbbing technology. It was now Nexus 7, the primary broadcast hub for the harmony field across the entire Gulf sector. It pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, its ancient stone walls now veined with a network of glowing, fibrous conduits that drank power directly from the geothermal taps the architects had drilled deep into the earth. Our plan was as insane as it was simple. We weren't going to destroy it. We couldn't. Their tech was self-repairing, shielded, but a defector, a bioengineer who had grown a conscience after seeing his own people prune, a species on another world, had given us a key. Not a physical key, but a sliver of code, a viral question that, if uploaded directly into the Nexus's core data stream, could force it to run a full diagnostic on the Harmony field itself. It wouldn't shut it down, but for a few crucial hours, it would have to record everything, every command, every subroutine, every failsafe. It would give us a complete schematic of our prison, a blueprint we could use to find a real weakness, a way to tear it all down. The defector had paid for that code with his life. We found what was left of him in a bayou shack, his body dismantled with surgical precision, a warning left for any of his kind who might also feel a pang of sympathy for the primitives. We owed it to him to see this through. There were 4 of us, Anya and me on the water, providing infiltration and covering the escape. The other 2, Marcus and Lena Simisanen, were already inside. Marcus was a pre-fall tech wizard, a wiry kid who could make scavenged circuit boards sing. Lena was his muscle and his shadow, a former tunnel rat from the old sewer maintenance crews who could move through the darkest spaces like a ghost. They'd gone in 12 hours ago, through a submerged aqueduct that fed the cathedral's ancient cisterns, a route Anya had dredged from a century-old city map I'd managed to preserve. Now, all we could do was wait for their signal, a single, brief pulse on a secured frequency. It would mean they'd reached the core chamber and were ready to upload the code. Then all hell would break loose. "They're late," I murmured, scanning the cathedral's face. The soft light of the conduit seemed to pulse in time with my own anxious heartbeat. One of their patrols, a silent, hovering disk, drifted past the spires, its single crimson sensor sweeping the drowned streets below. My hand tightened on the stock of my rifle, an old piece of human junk, a relic that fired lead slugs instead of coherent light. It was loud and inefficient, but it was ours. It didn't rely on their power grid or their energy frequencies. In a world of whispers and seamless technology, its brutal, honest roar was a comfort. Anya followed my gaze. "Marcus knows the patrol patterns. He'll wait for the gap. Kid's jumpy, but he's not stupid." She ran a whetstone along the tip of her spear. The rhythmic scrape, 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 a calming mantra against the oppressive silence. She was right. Marcus was the best we had. But this was the Nexus. It wasn't some forgotten substation. It was their brainstem in this city. The internal defenses would be unlike anything we'd faced before. The architects didn't use soldiers, not in the way we understood them. They had wardens, biomechanical constructs that were both beautiful and terrifying. They moved with an unsettling grace, their pearlescent carapaces shifting and reforming, capable of extruding blades, energy projectors, or capture tendrils in the blink of an eye. We'd only ever fought one, a lone warden that had discovered one of our old hideouts. We'd lost 5 people just to bring it down, and even then, we'd only succeeded by collapsing a building on top of it. The thought of Marcus and Lena facing a squadron of them in the heart of their own fortress made my stomach clench. I remembered the early days, the hope that had been so intoxicating it felt like a drug. The architects had arrived in ships like sculpted water, their forms tall and ethereal, speaking to us in a language of pure mathematics that our computers translated into poetry. They showed us how to heal our world, and we worshiped them for it. We dismantled our armies, turned our weapons into scrap, and welcomed them into our homes. The Harmony Field had been introduced as a wellness tool, a way to ease the societal anxieties that led to war and strife. It was voluntary at first, but the peace it offered was addictive. Soon, nearly everyone was bathed in its calming glow. Those of us who refused, who cherished our rough edges, were labeled dissonant, sick. We were offered treatment. When we refused that, we became whispers, then shadows. We became the ghosts haunting the edges of their perfect new world. A soft crackle from the radio in my ear jolted me back to the present. It wasn't the signal. It was Lena's voice. A single choked word. Wardens. My blood went cold. Anya stiffened, her hand freezing on the whetstone. They were waiting for us. Lena's voice came again, strained, the sound of a desperate, running fight echoing behind her, the high-pitched whine of an energy discharge, the sickening crunch of something organic hitting stone. The defector, it was a trap. They knew a trap. The code wasn't a key. It was bait. They had been watching, waiting, letting us gather our pathetic little resistance into one place so they could scoop us up. I grabbed the radio. Lena, get out. Forget the mission. Get out now. The only reply was a burst of static. Then the sound of the radio hitting a hard surface, followed by a final, piercing shriek that was cut unnervingly short. Silence. The silence that followed was worse than the scream. Heavier, deeper. It was the sound of a light being extinguished. Anya was already moving, her face a mask of cold fury. They're not dead yet, she hissed, grabbing a waterproof pack from the bottom of the skiff. We're going in. It was suicide, a frontal assault on the most heavily fortified architect structure in the sector. But the thought of leaving Marcus and Lena in there, of letting the architects take them to be cured or dismantled, was impossible. They were my people. They were all I had left. The aqueduct, I said, my voice thick. It's the only way. Anya shook her head with her eyes fixed on the cathedral. Too slow. They'll have it sealed. We're going in the front door. She pointed her spear toward the grand entrance of the cathedral, its massive bronze doors sealed with an architect energy field that shimmered like a heat haze. That field is tied to the local power conduit, she said, her voice dropping into the calm and tactical cadence of the captain she used to be. The ones running along the old levee wall. They're exposed. A shaped charge there will cause a cascade failure. The field will drop for maybe 30 seconds before the system reroutes. We get one shot. It was a plan born of pure desperation, a wild haymaker thrown in the dark. But desperation was our oldest friend. I checked the magazine on my rifle. The familiar weight is of the steel, a small, solid truth in a world of lies. I thought of my sister, Clara, her face placid and smiling in my last memory of her, telling me how wonderful it was not to feel anger anymore. But right now, anger was all I had. It was a fire in the cold, a reason to move, a promise I'd made to myself in the dark. The architects wanted to save us from our messy or violent emotions. Fine. Let them see just how messy we could be. I nodded at Anya. 30 seconds. Let's make them count. We pushed the skiff out from under the hotel's shadow, the lavender twilight of the alien sky illuminating the path to the monster's door. We were going to kick it open, or die on the steps. Either way, the silence was about to be broken. Part 2. The skiff sliced through the water, leaving a silent silver wake under the lavender haze. The Cathedral of St. Louis grew with every pull of my pole, its ancient stone seeming to absorb the alien light, holding it within like a captured soul. The air grew thick, humming with a low-frequency thrum that I could feel in my teeth the raw, unfiltered power of the Nexus. We hugged the curve of what was once Jackson Square, now a shallow lagoon dotted with the moss-draped heads of statues. The old levee wall was a dark, crumbling spine of rock and concrete, running along its crest, half submerged in slimy water, were the conduits Anya had marked on my map. They were thick as my arm, encased in a semi-translucent material that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, the lifeblood of the energy field on the cathedral doors. Anya cut the small electric motor we used for open water and let our momentum carry us into the levee's shadow. She unslung the waterproof pack and produced the charge, a compact brick of scavenged plastics and refined chemicals, courtesy of Marcus's better days. It was a crude tool for a delicate job. "The third junction," she whispered, her voice barely a breath of air. "The field's primary capacitor is right behind it. We blow the conduit. The capacitor will overload trying to compensate. That's our window." I watched her slip over the side of the skiff, the water closing around her waist without a splash. She moved with a liquid grace that belied her years, a creature of this drowned world. I kept my rifle trained on the cathedral, my eyes scanning the spires, the recessed windows, every shadow that seemed too deep. The hovering disc patrol was on the far side of its sweep, but I knew their sensors could pick up a rat's heartbeat at 500 yards if they were looking for it. The trap had been sprung. They were looking. Anya pressed the charge against the conduit, her fingers working quickly to secure the magnetic clamps. She molded a smaller piece of plastic around the detonator to direct the blast inward, a trick she'd learned from dynamiting ice flows back when the world was still cold. She swam back, silent as a gator, and hauled herself into the skiff, dripping and focused. "Get ready," she said, holding up a small rubber-sealed detonator. "When I push this, you pull like the devil himself is chasing us. We have less than a minute to cross the square and get through those doors." I gripped the long pole, my knuckles white. The distance seemed immense. An open killing field of dark water. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. For Marcus, for Lena. I gave her a sharp nod. Anya's thumb pressed down. The world went white and silent for a fraction of a second. The charge detonated with a sharp, contained crack, followed by a deep, resonant thump as the capacitor on the other side blew its guts out. A shower of violet sparks erupted from the levee wall, and across the square, the shimmering heat haze over the cathedral doors flickered violently, then vanished. "Go!" Anya roared, and I plunged the pole deep, pushing off the silty bottom with all the strength I had. The skiff surged forward, the air filled with a rising shriek as the Nexus's automated system screamed about the damage. Alarms, silent and psionic, were no doubt flaring in the minds of every architect and warden in the sector. We were a virus now, a sudden, sharp pain in the system. We hit the stone steps of the cathedral plaza with a jarring crunch. I vaulted out, my boots splashing in the shallow water, rifle up and scanning. Anya was right behind me, her spear gun held at her shoulders. The great bronze doors, each carved with the likeness of a long-dead saint, stood ajar, the broken field sparking at their edges. We slipped through the gap into the narthex just as the shield snapped back into place with a hum that made the stone vibrate. We were in, and we were trapped. The inside of the cathedral was a place of profound cognitive dissonance. The soaring Gothic arches, the vaulted ceilings, the faded outlines of celestial frescoes were still there, but they were entangled, infested with architect technology, thick, Fibrous cables, like the roots of an impossible tree, snaked across the stone, pulsing with the same soft, internal light as the conduits outside. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and damp stone. And the harmony field was a crushing weight here, a physical presence that tried to soothe the panic in my chest, to smooth the sharp edges of my rage. I felt it whispering at the corners of my mind, a siren song of placid acceptance. Everything is well. There is no conflict. Lay down your arms. Fight it, Elias. Anya's voice was a low growl, a grounding anchor in the psionic tide. Remember why we're here. I focused on Lena's final, cut-off scream, on the image of Marcus's terrified face, and the rage returned. A cleansing fire. The whispers receded, unable to quench a blaze that hot. We moved forward, past pews that were half swallowed by the alien growth, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The main chamber, the nave, was unrecognizable, where the altar should have been. A massive, crystalline structure hovered, spinning slowly, bathing the room in a soft, shifting light. It was the heart of the Nexus, the core broadcaster for the Harmony Field, and floating around it, like silent, predatory sharks, were two wardens. They were more beautiful and more horrifying than I had imagined. They weren't machines, they were grown. Their bodies were a seamless fusion of pearlescent carapace and what looked like sculpted, living muscle, all flowing curves and impossible angles. They had no visible eyes, no face, just a smooth, featureless head that tilted as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear. They drifted through the air with an effortless grace that defied gravity. We ducked behind the remains of a marble baptismal font as one of the wardens turned in our direction. Its head swiveled, and a section of its torso peeled back, revealing a lens of deep, crimson light that swept the room. It was looking for us. They know we're here, I breathed. We need to find the holding cells. Old church maps showed a crypt, a place for the dead. Anya pointed with her chin to a shadowed archway near the side of the chamber, half obscured by a curtain of the pulsing, root-like cables. Sacristy. It would connect to the crypts. Getting there meant crossing 50 yards of open floor, directly under the gaze of those two floating nightmares. We didn't have a choice. On my mark, Anya whispered, tensing. I'll draw the fire of the one on the left. You run for the archway. Before I could argue, she broke from cover, firing her spear gun. The heavy, barbed spear shot across the nave, not at the warden, but at the massive, spinning crystal of the core. It was a move of pure, audacious genius. The spear struck the crystal with a deafening clang, not penetrating its shield, but creating an acoustic shockwave, an impurity in the perfect system. The effect was instantaneous. Both wardens snapped toward the core, their bodies contorting in a flash of light. Alarms blared, this time audibly. A piercing alien shriek. Sections of their carapaces opened, glowing with intense energy. They saw the attack on the core as the primary threat. Now, Elias, Anya screamed, already sprinting in the opposite direction toward the far side of the nave. I ran. My lungs burned. My legs pumped. The stone floor cold and hard under my worn boots. I risked a glance back. Anya had slid behind a pillar, reloading her spear gun as one warden fired a beam of pure energy that vaporized the spot she had just been. The other warden was focused on me. It moved with a speed that was sickeningly fast, a blur of white and pearl. A blade, thin and impossibly sharp, extruded from its arm. I dove, skidding across the floor as the blade sliced through the air where my head had been, scoring a deep gouge in the stone. I rolled, came up on one knee, and fired my rifle. The roar of the gunpowder weapon was a savage, primitive violation in this sterile space. The lead slugs hammered into the warden's torso. They didn't penetrate the carapace, but they hit with a brutal, kinetic force that the creature was not designed for. Its elegant flight faltered. It slammed back against a pillar, disoriented by the sheer, crude violence of the impact. It gave me the second I needed. I scrambled through the archway, into the darkness of the sacristy, my heart feeling like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I found the stone stairs leading down into the crypt, the air growing colder, heavier. The alien roots were here too, thinner, but still present, weaving through the cracks in the stone tombs of ancient bishops. But down here, there was another smell, antiseptic, medical, and another sound, a low, rhythmic hum, punctuated by a soft, wet clicking. I followed the sound into a larger chamber, a place that had once housed the church's most sacred relics. Now, it was a laboratory, and the relics were human. Marcus was there. He was suspended in the center of the room, held aloft by a web of the fibrous cables that were plugged directly into his neck, his spine, his skull. His eyes were open, wide, and staring, but they saw nothing. His skin was pale, translucent, and I could see the alien tech branching under his skin. A network of faint, violet lines. He was being integrated, woven into the nexus itself. His mind, his technical genius, was being cataloged, indexed, and absorbed. He was becoming another component in their perfect machine. On a slab next to him, Lena lay unconscious, a single, thin fiber already probing at the base of her skull, preparing to do the same to her. Rage, pure and absolute, unlike anything I had ever felt, washed over me. The whispers of the harmony field burned away to nothing in its heat. I raised my rifle, but a warden appeared in the doorway behind me, silent as a tombstone. It had recovered, its featureless face tilted, and I felt a voice in my head, not a whisper, but a clear, cold, and utterly alien thought. Cease. This is not destruction. This is ascension. I fired. The bullet sparked off its head. It raised its arm, an energy projector glowing, and then a spear slammed into its side, punching through a joint in the carapace. Anya stood in the opposite doorway, her face grim. "I told you I'd draw its fire," she said, but her chest heaving. The warden shrieked, a sound of static and tearing metal, and turned on her. It gave me the opening. I ran to Lena, ripping the probe from her neck. Dark fluid, not blood, oozed from the wound. I sawed at the restraints holding her to the slab with my knife. Behind me, the sounds of the fight were brutal and short. I heard Anya yell, a grunt of pain. The crack of my rifle firing, she must have grabbed it, and then a final, sickening crunch. I hauled Lena over my shoulder. She was limp, a dead weight. I turned, my knife in hand, and ready to face whatever was left. The warden lay in a heap, its head crushed, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Anya stood over it, leaning heavily on the cathedral wall. Her left arm was bent at a hideous angle, and a dark stain was spreading across her side. But she was alive. "He's gone, Elias," she said, her voice strained, nodding toward Marcus's floating form. "We can't help him." I knew she was right. The thing in the web of cables wasn't Marcus anymore. Leaving him was like cutting off a part of myself, but the alternative was joining him. "There's another way out," I said, my voice hoarse. An old sewer drain in the lower crypt. Lena showed me the plans once. Anya nodded, pushing herself off the wall. Good, because I don't think they'll let us use the front door again. We half-carried, half-dragged Lena into the deeper darkness of the crypt, leaving the humming, clicking sounds of Marcus's ascension behind us. We had failed. We had lost. But as we fled into the dark tunnels beneath the city, I held on to one burning truth. We had seen the architect's true faces. This wasn't salvation, it was consumption. And our war for survival had just begun. Part 3. The darkness of the old city's bowels was absolute. A thick, smothering blanket that swallowed the light from our dying headlamps. The air was a putrid cocktail of stagnant water, methane, and the faint, sweet scent of the alien pollen that had seeped down through 1,000 cracks in the world above. Every sound was magnified: the drip of water from a vaulted brick ceiling, the scuttling of unseen things in the muck, the ragged, painful gasps of Anya's breathing beside me. We were deep, far deeper than our usual bolt holes, navigating a labyrinth of pre-fall storm drains and sewer conduits using a map I'd memorized from a fragile paper schematic. I had half-carried, half-dragged Lena's unconscious form for what felt like miles, my muscles screaming in protest, while Anya limped along, her face a pale, sweat-sheened mask of agony. Her broken arm was bound tight against her chest with a strip of cloth torn from my shirt, and the wound in her side, which I'd packed with the last of our sterile gauze, oozed a dark, sluggish crimson. She was fading, and we both knew it. We found a relatively dry junction, a circular chamber where 3 massive tunnels converged, and I gently laid Lena down on a raised stone walkway. Her breathing was shallow, her face unnervingly still. The architect's probe had been in her for less than a minute, but the damage was done. I didn't know if it was neurological, biological, or something far worse, something for which we had no name. All I knew was that the fierce, vibrant woman who had gone into that cathedral had not yet come back out. "We can't stay here," Anya rasped, slumping against the curved wall. "They'll be hunting." I knew she was right. The architects were methodical. They would have sealed the aqueduct entrance. They would calculate our most likely escape routes through the Undercity. They wouldn't send wardens down here. The tunnels were too confined for their elegant, flowing combat. They would send something else, something built for the dark. "I need to look at that wound," I said, ignoring her protest. I carefully peeled back the makeshift bandage. The flesh around the gash was inflamed and faint, thread-like violet lines, a color I knew all too well, were beginning to spread from its edges. A bio-infection, a parting gift from the warden's blade. Their weapons weren't just designed to cut. They were designed to seed their own alien nanites into the wound, to break down and catalog the victim from the inside out. "Damn it, Anya!" She glanced down, her expression grim but unsurprised. "Knew it felt wrong. It burns." There was a place, a ghost from the old world we'd whispered about but never dared to seek. The Cypress Ghost. It was a decommissioned deep bayou research submersible, a relic from a time when corporations were still mapping the methane seeps in the Gulf. According to the legends, a handful of anti-architect survivalists had retrofitted it years ago, sinking it in a hidden, deep-water cove and turning it into a self-sustaining, shielded bunker. It had medical facilities, real ones. It was our only chance. "The ghost," I said, my voice low. "We have to make it to the Cypress Ghost." Anya managed a weak, humorless smile. Always the archivist, chasing myths. You sure it's real? It has to be, I replied, meeting her tired gaze. It was a 100-mile journey through the most dangerous and terraformed swampland on the continent, but it was better than the alternative sitting here in the dark, waiting for our bodies to betray us. As if on cue, a sound echoed from the tunnel we'd just come from. It wasn't a footstep. It was a high-frequency, multi-toned clicking, accompanied by a faint, chitinous scraping. "Crawlers," Anya hissed, her good hand instinctively reaching for the spear gun she no longer had. My stomach turned to ice. Crawlers were the architect's scouts, their bloodhounds, vaguely insectoid, multi-limbed biomechs the size of a large dog. They were relentless, agile, and could see in every spectrum of light. They didn't kill, they tracked, tagged, and called in the wardens for the harvest. We were being hunted. I hoisted Lena back over my shoulder. Her dead weight felt heavier now, freighted with a new and urgent terror. "Which way?" Anya asked, forcing herself to her feet, her hand pressed tight against her side. I glanced at the 3 tunnels. My memorized map was a 2-dimensional thing, a creature of paper and ink. Down here, in the 3-dimensional, collapsing reality. It was a prayer at best. I closed my eyes, trying to picture the schematic, to feel the flow of water, the subtle grade of the tunnels. One led back toward the city's heart. One sloped down, likely toward a flooded pumping station. The third, the one on the right, seemed to level out, heading south, toward the wetlands. "Right," I said, the word a coin toss in the dark. We moved as fast as we could, which was agonizingly slow. The clicking and scraping grew more distant, then faded, and for a while there was only the sound of our own ragged breathing and the slosh of our boots in the muck. We waded through a flooded section, the water chest deep and colder than a grave, my teeth chattering as I struggled to keep Lena's head above the surface. Anya's face was ashen, her movements becoming sluggish. The infection was accelerating in the cold. We finally emerged into a cavernous cistern, the ceiling lost in the darkness above. A network of rusted catwalks crisscrossed the space, and in the center, a massive, silent screw pump was being slowly consumed by the same glowing, root-like growths we'd seen in the cathedral. The nexus was everywhere. Its roots ran as deep as our own history. And then Lena groaned. My head snapped down. Her eyes fluttered open. They weren't the fierce, sharp eyes I knew. They were unfocused, milky, staring at something on the high, dark ceiling that I couldn't see. "Lena," I whispered, my voice tight with a terrifying hope. She blinked slowly, her gaze drifting down to meet mine. There was a flicker of recognition, a spark of the old Lena, and then it was gone, replaced by a profound and weary confusion. "It's so loud," she murmured, her voice a dry rasp. "What's loud?" I asked, gently lowering her to sit on the grated floor of the catwalk. Anya leaned against the railing, watching, her expression unreadable. "The signal," Lena said, pressing the heels of her palms into her temples. "The song. It's wrong. It's pulling at the edges of things." Before I could ask what she meant, she flinched, her eyes darting toward a dark corner of the cistern. "There," she whispered, a new, sharp fear in her voice. "It's listening." I looked. I saw nothing but shadow and dripping water, but Anya had heard the conviction in Lena's tone. She pulled my rifle from my shoulder. "Give me a magazine," she ordered. I handed her one, my hands shaking slightly. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it. A flicker of movement. Not a crawler. Something smaller, a scanner, a little spider-like thing, its single crimson eye glowing in the dark as it clung to the wall. Its purpose not to hunt, but to observe, to tag. It had found us. Without a moment's hesitation, Anya raised the rifle with her one good arm, bracing it against the railing. The weapon's roar was deafening in the enclosed space, a brutal clap of thunder that echoed off the high walls. The scanner exploded in a shower of sparks and black fluid, but the damage was done. It had broadcast our position. We had minutes, maybe less. "Let's move," Anya grunted, handing the rifle back to me. "Now!" Lena was on her feet now, unsteady but moving under her own power, her hand still pressed to her head. Whatever the probe had done to her, it had connected her to their network in some way. She had heard the harmony field, felt the scanner. She was a liability and, terrifyingly, a potential asset. We found the tunnel leading out of the cistern and plunged back into the oppressive dark. We could hear the crawlers now, multiple of them, their clicking echoing from the tunnels behind us, closing the distance. The chase was on. We ran, stumbling through the slime and filth, our headlamps carving frantic, bobbing holes in the darkness. We burst out of a rusted drain pipe into the humid, cloying air of the bayou, tumbling down a muddy embankment into a stand of alien-looking cypress trees. Their bark shimmered with a faint bioluminescence, and the Spanish moss that hung from their branches was a deep, unsettling shade of violet. The sky above was a starless, lavender smear. We were out of the city, but we were in their garden now. The air was thick with the chirps and clicks of unseen creatures, a symphony of a world remade. Behind us, from the drain pipe we just exited, a crawler emerged. It was sleek and multi-jointed, its crimson eye lenses sweeping the clearing. It paused, tasting the air, then let out a high-pitched shriek, a signal to the rest of its pack. "Run!" I yelled, pulling Lena along with me. We plunged into the swamp, the water instantly sucking at our boots, the thick mud trying to drag us down. Anya, running on pure adrenaline and rage, kept pace, her breathing a series of painful, ragged hitches. The Cypress Ghost was miles away, across an alien landscape that was actively hostile to us, and the architect's hounds were at our heels. But as I looked at Lena, her face tight with pain, but her eyes now clear and focused on the threat behind us, I felt a sliver of something that wasn't despair. We were wounded, we were hunted, and we were hopelessly outgunned, but we were free of the cage, and for the first time, one of us could hear the whispers of the jailer. We would turn their weapon against them, or we would die trying in the beautiful, terrible swamp they had made. Part 4. The bayou was a nightmare canvas painted in shades of violet and phosphorescence. We crashed through water that shimmered with alien algae and stumbled over cypress knees that pulsed with a soft, internal light. The air was a physical weight, thick with humidity and the dizzying perfume of blossoms that had no earthly right to exist. Behind us, the pack of crawlers flowed through the twisted landscape like a river of obsidian and chrome, their multi-toned clicks a form of echolocation, mapping our every panicked step. They weren't just hunting us, they were hurting us, cutting off angles of escape with a terrifying, networked intelligence. Anya was a ghost at my side, her face bleached of color, her movements growing more erratic. The warden's infection was spreading, the faint violet lines under her skin now starkly visible, branching out from the wound in her side like a crystalline frost. Each ragged breath was a testament to a will that simply refused to break. I kept a firm grip on Lena's arm, pulling her through the sucking mud. Her initial daze had been replaced by a hypersensitive, nerve-shredded awareness. She flinched at the flutter of a moth's wings, her eyes darting into shadows where I saw nothing. The architect's signal, the song she had called it, was a constant, grinding pressure in her mind. A crawler scuttled onto a low-hanging branch ahead of us, its red optic glowing. It dropped to the ground, blocking our path. Before I could even raise my rifle, Anya lunged forward, not with a weapon, but with a piece of rotted cypress she'd scooped from the mud. She swung it like a club, a primal, desperate act of defiance. The blow connected with the crawler's head with a wet crunch, staggering it, but its forelimb lashed out, a blade of sharpened chitin that sliced through the air. Anya threw herself back, but not fast enough. The blade opened a fresh, deep gash along her good arm. She stumbled, falling to one knee, the fight finally draining from her eyes. Two more crawlers burst from the reeds to our left, their clicks rising in pitch, a sound of imminent capture. We were pinned. It was over. I pushed Lena behind me, leveling the rifle, knowing its 5 remaining rounds were a meaningless gesture. Stop. Lena's voice was a choked whisper behind me. I ignored her, my finger tightening on the trigger. Elias, stop. I can hear them. I risked a glance back. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her knuckles white where she gripped her own head. A thin trickle of blood ran from her nose. They aren't thinking, she gasped, her words strained and strange. They're resonating. They're just notes in the song. And the song has a flaw. The crawlers paused, their heads tilting in unison, their crimson optics focused on Lena. They recognized her as the source of a new, dissonant frequency. Lena, what are you doing? I yelled, panic rising in my throat. Her body was trembling, a low hum seeming to emanate from her, a vibration I could feel through the soles of my boots. They gave me a key, she murmured, her eyes snapping open. They were no longer milky or confused. They were blazing with a terrifying, focused light. I'm gonna play it back to them. Wrong. The air crackled. The chirps and clicks of the swamp abruptly ceased. The crawlers began to twitch, their movements becoming spastic, uncoordinated. One of them began scraping at its own head with its bladed forelimb, tearing grooves in its own carapace. Lena screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure mental effort, and the crawlers went berserk. They turned on each other, a whirlwind of tearing limbs and shrieking metal. They were blind to us now, lost in a feedback loop of corrupted data. Their perfect network turned into an instrument of their own destruction. We didn't wait to watch the end. I hauled Anya to her feet, her body a dead weight against me, and with Lena stumbling ahead of us, we plunged deeper into the swamp, leaving the sounds of the cannibalizing machines behind. We found temporary shelter in the hollowed-out root system of a massive, alien banyan tree, its aerial roots forming a cathedral-like dome around us. Lena collapsed the moment we were inside, the psychic effort having shattered her reserves. She was asleep before she hit the damp ground, the blood on her face stark against her pale skin. Anya slid down the wall of roots, her breathing shallow and wet. I tore a strip from her pant leg and bound the new wound on her arm, my hands slick with her blood. She's a weapon, Anya breathed, her voice barely audible. They tried to turn Marcus into a computer, but they turned her into an antenna. The violet lines on her skin were pulsing now, a faint, sickly light that matched the rhythm of her failing heart. The infection had reached her core. We're close, Anya, I said, my voice thick with a lie I desperately wanted to believe. The coordinates for the ghost are just a few miles north. She coughed, a racking, painful sound. "It's a one-way trip for me, Elias." "You know that." "Don't," I said, my voice breaking. "Don't you dare." She reached out with her good hand, her fingers surprisingly strong as they gripped my arm. Her eyes, clouded with pain, were still the eyes of a captain giving her last order. "You listen to me. This isn't about me anymore. It's about her." She nodded toward Lena. "She's the key, the flaw in their perfect song. The ghost. If it's real, it's not just a hospital. It's a shielded place. A place where she might be able to learn to control that thing in her head without their signal drowning her out. You get her there. You protect her. That's the mission now." Tears I hadn't realized were their track paths through the grime on my face. I could only nod. We sat in silence for a long time. The only sounds the drip of condensation and the thrumming of the alien swamp. We had won the battle, but I was losing the war for the only person who had been my anchor in this drowned world. When Lena woke, hours later, the lavender twilight was deepening. She seemed clearer, the psychic pressure having receded after its violent outburst. She looked at Anya, at the pulsing, spreading infection, and a look of profound, aching sorrow crossed her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Anya just shook her head. "Nothing to be sorry for, kid. You got us out." We ate the last of our rations, a dry, tasteless nutrient bar split 3 ways and prepared to move. Anya could barely stand. I made a sling for her broken arm and half-carried her, my own body screaming with exhaustion. Lena walked ahead, her movements now strangely certain. She was our guide, her new senses a compass in the alien landscape. "The air is different here," she said, her voice quiet. "Thicker. The song is fuzzy, muted." We had entered a new zone of the bayou. The terraforming was more intense, the flora more aggressive. Massive, plate-sized orchids bloomed in the canopy, and the air was hazy with their pollen, a fine, golden dust that coated every surface and made my eyes water. The further we went, the thicker it became, until we were wading through a shimmering, golden fog that limited visibility to a few feet. "This pollen, it's not just pollen," Lena murmured, her hand back at her temple. "It's a broadcast medium, a low-level soporific. It's designed to calm, to pacify. It's a harmony field for the entire ecosystem." It was a passive defense system. We were walking into another, more subtle kind of trap. My head began to feel heavy, my limbs leaden. The desperation that had been driving me began to feel distant, unimportant. The whispers returned, not sharp and intrusive like in the Nexus, but soft, gentle, like the pollen itself. "Rest. It is peaceful here. There is no need to struggle." Beside me, Anya stumbled, her eyes glazing over. "Anya," I shouted, the sound of my own voice seeming to come from a great distance. I shook her, but her head just lolled. The pollen was overwhelming her compromised system. "Lena," I cried out, fighting the crushing psychic weight. "We have to get through it." Lena was struggling too, her face a mask of concentration, but her unique connection to the architect's network was giving her an anchor. She could feel the edges of the pollen's influence, the shape of the field. "There," she pointed into the golden haze. "There's a hole, a dead spot. Something is pushing back against it." I couldn't see anything but the swirling, golden fog. I hoisted Anya fully into my arms, her weight an agonizing burden, and staggered in the direction Lena had pointed. Every step was a battle against a desire to simply lie down and let the peaceful, golden silence take me. "It's close," Lena urged, her voice the only thing cutting through the fog in my mind. "I can feel it. It's a bubble of nothing, of pure, beautiful silence." We broke through a wall of hanging, violet moss, and the world changed. The golden haze stopped as if it had hit an invisible wall. The air was clear, clean, tasting of salt and ozone. We were standing on the edge of a deep, dark water cove, hidden and sheltered by the alien swamp. And there, half submerged in the black water, its hull scarred and draped with algae but its lines still sharp and defiant, was a submarine, the Cypress Ghost. It was real. We had made it. But as I took a final, stumbling step toward the water's edge, Anya's body went limp in my arms. Her breathing, shallow for so long, stopped completely. The faint, violet light in her veins flickered one last time, and then went dark. Part 5. There is no ceremony for the dead in a world stolen by thieves. There is only the weight of their absence and the duty to remember. I carried Anya's body to the edge of the dark, silent cove. The water was black and still, a perfect mirror for the alien sky. And for a moment, it felt like laying her to rest among a field of violet, unblinking stars. Lena stood beside me, a silent, shivering sentinel, the fierce, indomitable captain, who had faced down the rising oceans and an invasion from the void, was gone. All that was left was the cold, heavy truth of her in my arms. I let her slip into the water. There was no splash, only a quiet sigh as the blackness took her, pulling her down into the deep, shielded silence she had fought so hard to find. It was a fitting grave for a woman who loved the water, a final retreat from the world that had been so cruelly remade. I watched until the last ripple faded, and then a cold I had never known settled deep into my bones. The mission was complete. The cost was absolute. "We have to go." Lena's voice was soft, but it held a new, hard edge of command. She had taken Anya's last order to heart. The submarine was a hulking, silent shape in the water, its conning tower breaking the surface like the head of some ancient, steel leviathan. We found the primary access hatch below the waterline, sealed by a heavy manual wheel. It took our combined, exhausted strength to crank it open, the sound of grinding, protesting metal a sacrilege in the cove's quiet. We slipped inside, sealing the world out behind us. The air within the Cypress Ghost was cold, sterile, and smelled of ozone, recycled air, and old, oiled steel. It was the smell of the world that was, a scent from a museum. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows down a narrow corridor. This was not a place of comfort. It was a machine for survival, cramped and utilitarian, a metal womb holding the last, flickering spark of a forgotten age. We moved cautiously through the silent vessel, our footsteps echoing on the grated decking. Every bulkhead, every valve, every tightly packed bundle of wiring was a testament to a purely human ingenuity, a beautiful, chaotic mess of function over form that stood in stark defiance to the seamless, grown technology of the architects. We found the command center, a tight space dominated by a panoramic viewport of thick, reinforced glass, looking out into the black water. And there, sitting in the captain's chair, was a man. He was old, with a face like a weathered map and eyes the color of a faded sky. A tangle of wires ran from a console behind him to a simple headset he wore, and he watched our approach on a bank of flickering, monochrome monitors. He didn't seem surprised. merely weary, as if our arrival was just another line of code in a long and tiresome program. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice a dry rustle of disuse. He gestured a bony hand around the silent command center. "Welcome to the mausoleum. My name is Kael, and I appear to be the last living exhibit." He was the ghost's keeper, the final member of the team that had brought the sub here a decade ago. The others, he explained, had died of sickness, of age, of the crushing, silent weight of their lost world. He had stayed, maintaining the sub's geothermal power source, its atmospheric processors, its most vital system, the shield. The sub was wrapped in a counter-frequency resonance field, a bubble of pure, technological static that didn't just block the harmony field, it actively erased it. It was the silence Lena had felt. For the first time in 10 years, she was free of the song. The relief was so profound she almost collapsed, leaning against a bulkhead and simply breathing, as if tasting clean air for the first time. Kael's faded eyes lingered on her, his expression shifting from weary indifference to a sharp, clinical interest. "The architects did that to you," he said, not a question, but a statement. "They opened a door in your mind." Over the next 2 days, as I slept the sleep of the dead and my body slowly began to heal, Kael and Lena worked. He had equipment I'd only ever seen in archived schematics neuroscanners, biofeedback monitors, tools for mapping the very landscape of the human mind. He confirmed what Anya had suspected: the probe hadn't just been a data extraction tool, it had rewired her, turning her brain into a receiver that could not only hear the harmony field, but could, potentially, broadcast on the same frequency. The flaw she had discovered, the dissonant note, was her own messy, chaotic, human consciousness. Our sanctuary, however, was temporary. On the third day, the sub's passive sensors picked something up, a single, massive energy signature, moving slowly but deliberately through the swamp, straight toward us. It wasn't a warden, and it wasn't a pack of crawlers. "It's a purifier," Kael said, his voice grim as he studied the readings. "I've only seen them on the deep-range logs, when the architects were first cleansing the dissonant ecosystems. It's not a soldier. It's an exterminator. It won't just capture us. It will unmake this entire cove, break it all down to its component molecules, and rebuild it in their image. The shield won't stop it." Panic, cold and familiar, gripped me. We had run so far only to be cornered at the very end. "Can we fight it?" I asked, my hand going to my rifle. Kael gave me a pitying look. "That's like asking a fly if it can fight a hurricane." It was Lena who answered, her voice calm and steady as she stood from the scanner she'd been wired to. "No," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "We can't fight it, but I can talk to it." The plan was born of the same desperate madness that had sent us into the Nexus. Kael's equipment could be reversed. Instead of just reading Lena's neural activity, it could amplify it. But to broadcast something strong enough to affect a purifier, she needed more than just her own thoughts. She needed a signal of immense complexity and power. She needed a library of raw, unfiltered, dissonant human experience. She needed me. She needed my memories. They strapped me into a chair beside her. A cold, metallic Neuralink headset pressed against my temples. "I need everything." "Elias," Lena said, her hand finding mine. Her palm was cold, but her grip was firm. "The good and the bad, the love and the rage. Don't hold anything back. It has to be pure." The purifier arrived. It was a monstrous, beautiful thing. A floating, multifaceted crystal the size of a building that pulsed with a clean, white light. It settled over the cove, and the water began to boil where its energy field touched it. The sub's hull groaned under the pressure. The lights flickered. Kyle began the sequence. "Now, Elias," Lena whispered. "Show me." I closed my eyes and let go. I gave her everything. I gave her the memory of my mother's smile, the sting of a childhood scrape, the taste of the first real coffee I'd ever had. I gave her the pride I felt watching Marcus bring a dead machine back to life, the easy camaraderie of Anya's gruff lessons, the fierce, protective love I felt for the sister I thought I'd lost. And then I gave her the darkness. I gave her the terror of the first warden, the searing rage of Lena's abduction, the acrid taste of fear in the cathedral, the brutal, crushing weight of Anya's death in my arms. I relived it all, and not as a story, but as raw, screaming sensation, the love, the grief, the hope, the fury, all the messy, contradictory, glorious, and terrible things the architects had tried to save us from. Through the link, I felt Lena take it all in. She didn't flinch. She took that chaotic, painful storm and shaped it. She found the rhythm in the madness, the melody in the noise. She began to sing. There was no sound in the sub, but I felt it. A wave of pure, concentrated humanity, broadcast on a frequency the architects had built, but could never understand. I felt the purifier shudder on the monitors. Its clean, white light began to flicker, corrupted by strobing. Chaotic colors. It was a being of pure logic and harmony, and we were feeding it the sonic equivalent of a riot. It was built to erase dissonance, but it had no defense against a signal that was composed entirely of it. It couldn't process love that was intertwined with grief, or hope that was born of despair. The sub bucked as the purifier's energy field collapsed. The monstrous crystal began to fracture, hairline cracks spreading across its perfect facets. A final, silent scream of corrupted data pulsed from it, and then it simply dissolved, its light folding in on itself until it vanished, leaving nothing but a churning, superheated patch of water in the cove. Silence. The hum of the sub's life support was the only sound. Kyle stared at his monitors, his mouth agape. I slumped in my chair, utterly drained, the psychic echo of 1,000 raw emotions leaving me hollowed out. Lena disconnected the headset, her face pale but her eyes shining. "The flaw in the song," she whispered, a small, tired smile on her face. "It's us." We buried Kale next to the cove a week later. The strain of the final sequence had been too much for his old heart. He died in his chair, a look of what might have been wonder on his face. We left him in the world he had refused to abandon. The Cypress Ghost was our home, our sanctuary, but we knew we couldn't stay. The architects now knew that something in this place could not only resist them, but could fight back. They would be back, and they would not send a single mindless machine next time. Our war was not over. It had just been given a new and terrible name. We stood on the conning tower of the sub as it surfaced in the open gulf, the lavender haze of the sky above, the endless, churning water below. I was no longer just an archivist of the dead. Lena was no longer just a survivor. I was the library, and she was the voice. They had come to save us from ourselves, to prune our messy, violent, unpredictable emotions. But they had failed. They had forgotten that in the heart of that chaos, in the beautiful, terrible dissonance of the human soul, lies our most powerful weapon. We were a flaw in their perfect universe, and we were about to start singing.